Okay, good evening. Welcome to Eat Clean Get Lean. This is week 12. This is our last week, so give me a moment just to get set up here and get my slide deck all set. And I'll start from the beginning. So, what are we gonna excuse me? What are we gonna talk about today? Is we're gonna talk about final thoughts on stubborn fat loss. Now, we all got through Christmas and New Year's Eve is tomorrow night, so we got one more day to get through. And I'm going to give you some suggestions along the way of what I think would work moving forward. Tomorrow, most of us are going to probably have a nice dinner, and some of us may have a couple of glasses of wine or champagne, and I think that's great. I think you should definitely go out and enjoy yourself tomorrow night. Um, but I think in preparation for that, one of the things you might choose to do is go into an eat less, exercise less model for tomorrow. In other words, you get up in the morning, maybe have a protein shake, and have a nice salad with protein for lunch or shake for lunch, and then have the dinner, excuse me, that you choose to have. Also, doing some cardio or a metabolic workout tomorrow would be a great idea. And then getting up the following morning, New Year's Day, and getting up and trying to fast perhaps till noon and maybe doing some cardio on an empty stomach. That'll help you to deal with the extra carbohydrates that you're going to take in tomorrow night. So I think that would be a good plan of attack. Or you could just do an eat more, exercise more model, which would make things even easier, where you do a nice metabolic training tomorrow and some cardio, and then you would be able to enjoy yourself because you worked more, you can eat more. So if you're going to exercise less, then you're going to eat less. So let's get into some areas. And again, I have time for questions or concerns. My cat's attacking my chair. And if anybody has questions, now's a good time. And of course, even though this is our last week of our program, you certainly have the opportunity to follow up with me. Everyone's already in the Facebook private Facebook fan page. Sorry. So we can follow up there. And if anyone has any other questions or concerns, feel free to reach out to me. I'll be in the office tomorrow, and I'll actually be in the office on New Year's Day. So it's all good. So how to target stubborn fat. That's kind of some of the areas we're going to go into tonight. So now that you've increased your fat burning globally by taking care to control the law of compensation and multitasking, it's time to teach you some advanced tricks for dealing with stubborn fat. So what do we know about compensation? We know that with metabolic compensation, if you don't eat properly, in other words, you eat less and exercise more, you know that obviously we've talked about this, you're going to create a hormonal imbalance, and compensation leads to the end road of that could be metabolic failure. So we don't want to go down that road. Now, with regards to multitasking, we know that the body either likes to burn fat or build muscle, but it doesn't like to do both at the same time. So throughout these 12 weeks, we've talked about manipulating that system by either eating less and exercising less, or exercising more and eating more. So let's talk about a few other things. Now, the 3-2-1 and the 3-2-2 protocols helped you break the diet cycle and take the brakes off that stubborn fat, allowing that fat to be burned at the same rate as the rest of the body, so you can reshape to the coveted hourglass or V shape. But sometimes, while fat loss from stubborn areas has sped up, it still lags behind the rest of the body. This seminar is going to help you troubleshoot that particular issue. So for the sake of simplicity, we're going to divide the stubborn fat into a few specific areas. First, we'll talk about female lower body fat and cellulite. Then we'll talk about female belly fat, male belly fat, the old love handles, the back of the arm fat, male chest fat, and we'll also address ways to adjust the women's cycle to combat fat as changes are happening or occurring. So let's talk a little bit about female lower body fat and cellulite. Now, women tend to carry increased body fat in the lower body, mainly because of the influence of estrogen, which increases the alpha-androtic receptor density in the buttocks, the hip, and the thigh area. So we have a beautiful picture of Marilyn Monroe, and you can see that she's carrying more of her weight in her hips and her thighs. Now, we've used the term alpha-androtic receptors before. So alpha-androtic receptors are areas that tend to store fat, as opposed to beta androtic receptors, which turn to burn fat. So we have, most men have more alpha-androtic receptors in their abdomen, where women tend to have it more in the hips and the thighs. And it's just a way for the body to conserve energy in areas that are conducive to that particular body type. So let's talk a little bit about cellulite. Now, in addition, the vertical position of female collagen fibers results in fat cell accumulation inside collagen pockets. Now, I'll show you a picture of this in just a few minutes. Now, this is important because this causes the characteristic dimpling or puckering of cellulite. This is important because the vertical distribution of female collagen fibers, more prevalent in the female lower body, form a sort of pocket in which fat cells then grow. As the fat cells grow in size, they are essentially corralled in and packed tightly together by the collagen fibers. So here you see a good example on the lower right. So picture a Nerf football stuffed between links in a chain link fence. This tight packing of fat inside the collagen pockets creates the characteristic puckering and dimpling of cellulite. So if you look on the right and you look at men's skin, you see more of a crisscross pattern. Okay, and that tends to hold the fat back a little bit, where women on the lower right have just parallel bands. So the fat kind of pokes through those two bands and causes that dimpling or that puckering effect. And that's just the difference between a male skin and female skin. So here we have another example of that same situation. You can see the long fibers running from the top to the bottom, and you can see the fat cells. Now, you don't lose fat cells when you lose weight. You lose what's inside of the fat cells. And fat cells can either shrink or they can grow to tremendous amounts. So keep in mind how easy it is to gain weight because those fat cells are always readily available to be refilled, kind of like a water balloon. So you take all the water out of a water balloon, but the balloon is still there, and it's quite easy to fill back up again. Again, how do we do that? We create hormonal imbalances. We start to eat too rich of a carbohydrate diet, refined carbohydrate diet, lack of exercise, and those fat cells can go right back doing what they're designed to do, and that's store fat, because there are times in our genetic history where food wasn't available, so the body had to have the ability to store fat in order to survive. So let's talk about blasting cellulite. Now, why do some women have cellulite and others don't? And why do some overweight women have less cellulite than skinny women? These are great questions and underscore the need to move beyond the simple fat loss models many experts cling to. Cellulite is not just an issue of gaining fat or losing fat. It's also an issue of doing something to address both fat loss and collagen strength and health. So there's an important theory. We'll talk a little bit about that. The collagen strength and collagen health. Okay, let's talk a little bit about protein. Protein is going to have a huge play in this. So for people who have inadequate amounts of protein, you're going to have collagen weakness and poor collagen health. The reason some women don't get cellulite and some women do get it and some don't is mostly genetics. Some women have collagen fibers that are more like a man's, and some have extreme versions of the vertical distribution. So getting rid of cellulite is perfectly possible for some women and far more difficult for others. So focusing on diet and exercise and stress reduction is your best approach to reshaping your lower body. So let's talk about diet. What kind of diet would be best for someone who has cellulite issues? Well, consider sticking to the EL approach during lower estrogen states, which is luteal phase of the menstrual cycle. Those are the 2 weeks between ovulation and menses. Make sure you do more relaxation activities during these times, and then do EM the other 2 weeks. So it depends on your cycle. When you're in the luteal phase of the menstrual cycle, that's when you're doing more eat less, exercise less, and more relaxation, more walking. And then during the other period, then you're going to do more eat more, exercise more. So exercise, okay, do 20 minutes of intense rest-based intervals or metabolic chain workouts for 20 minutes, followed by low-intensity walking for as long as possible, 3 to 5 times a week on an empty stomach. This is also what's called as glycogen-depleting exercise. So let's define a low glycogen state. We're using terms like low insulin state and glycogen depletion, which we know may be confusing. The best way to think about a low insulin state is a time when you've been without food for 4 to 6 hours or have been eating only vegetables and lean protein. The lowest insulin states would be first thing in the morning, 4 to 6 hours after eating, or at the end of the day on the 3-2-1 protocol when you've not eaten anything but mostly protein and vegetables the entire day. Now, glycogen is a storage form of sugar. Your body stores sugar as glycogen in your liver and in your muscles. The purpose of liver glycogen is to supply the brain and body with an easy sugar source when you go without eating. Glycogen in the muscle can only be used by the muscle to feed it when the resources are low. So that's why a lot of people say, well, you know, if my blood sugar is running a little low and my liver stores of glycogen are low, why can't the body just tap into the glycogen stored in the muscle? Well, it's a one-way street. There's no way for the glycogen to get out of the cell. The only way that the glycogen can leave the cell is to be metabolized by the cell. So once it's in, it has to be utilized there. So if your glycogen stores are constantly filled up as they would be in an eat more, exercise less situation, the body rarely needs to burn fat. That's why many Americans who eat large amounts of starch and sugar consistently, even when they go for an hour exercise session. Think of the gel packs and the Gatorade, never lose fat. Okay? So what do I mean by gel packs and Gatorade? Well, if you're working out and you're using a gel pack to try to get more energy, or Gatorade in a training session, you're not going to be able to burn stored body fat because your body has a relatively easy access to sugar with the gel packs and the Gatorade. So what were gel packs and Gatorade designed for? They were designed for performance. Performance is a lot different than training, okay? When we train, we want to get breathlessness and burning, okay? When we're performing, we want to put that off as long as possible because breathlessness and burning compromises our ability to perform, okay? So you can't train and you can't compete with the same blood sugar stability. You want a breathless and burning. You want to get into fat burning in a exercise model for training where you really want to be able to have an ample amount of energy and performance. So glycogen depletion is a state where the liver and muscle glycogen is lowered to some degree, making the body less resilient on stored sugars and more reliant on stored fat. Now be careful though, extreme glycogen depletion by randomly cutting out all carbohydrates and exercising like a fiend can cause the body to lose muscle or suffer metabolic compensation. That is why adequate protein intake, finding the carbohydrate tipping point, and training with weights is so critical to your fat loss efforts. Now, we talked about carbohydrate tipping point a couple of weeks ago. What does that mean? You don't want to have too little carbohydrate, because then you lose the ability to burn fat. Remember, fat burns in a carbohydrate flame. So in order to run what we call the Krebs cycle, which is just the way the body produces a usable form of energy. You remember the analogy I always give: the locomotive with the coal and the water makes steam, and steam is what drives the locomotive. Okay, we need an adequate amount of carbohydrate to help run the system. If we have too much carbohydrate in the system, okay, then we shut off fat burning. So finding that point is critical. Now, how do you know if you have too little carbohydrate? Well, it goes back to the, what is your hunger like? What is your energy like? And what's your cravings like? If you have horrible hunger, you have incredible cravings, and you have low energy, there's not enough carbohydrate coming into the system. Probably also not enough protein, fiber, and water as well. Well, what if your hunger is okay, your cravings are okay, you have good energy, but you're not losing fat? Well, then you've gone to the other side, and you're putting too much carbohydrate in the system because you're not able to burn fat. Let's talk a little bit about female belly fat. Now, female belly fat is more rare compared to male belly fat. This is largely due to the natural impact of estrogen and progesterone to protect fat gain around the middle. Subcutaneous belly fat, just that under the skin, and visceral belly fat, deep belly fat, also have slightly different properties. So what does that mean? Sometimes you'll see somebody with weight in their abdomen, and it's kind of loose, and it's not tight, and it easily moves, as opposed to that person you see who has a really tight, overextended abdomen. That's someone who has more visceral fat, as opposed to someone who has more subcutaneous fat. Subcutaneous fat tends to be a little softer and more pliable. Now, young women typically complain of stubborn subcutaneous belly fat, while older women complain of both visceral and subcutaneous fat. So belly fat means you're an apple shape, not a pear. Remember, pear is thinner at the top and wider at the bottom, where an apple is more rounded. So the hormonal impact: insulin and cortisol have a strong influence on belly fat in both men and women, with cortisol having more influence there for women. Okay, we talked a couple of weeks ago about the effects of cortisol and insulin, how that's more of a fat storage mechanism. We also talked about some other enzymes that are made to accentuate the ability for the fat cells to store more fat. Okay, and again, if you need to ever go back and listen to old seminars we've done, they're all available to you, or if you have questions, you certainly can address them to me. But we know that we definitely have enzymes that facilitate fat storage, and cortisol makes those enzymes work even more aggressively in storing fat. So often women with belly fat, meaning increased waist to hip ratios, are more stress sensitive and less stress adaptive, especially thin women with belly fat. So again, the hormonal impact on storing weight in the abdomen has a lot to do with stress. So here's some examples here. We have the person in A, they're more peripheral fat. You can see they have a better distribution of fat through their body, versus B, you can see the woman storing more fat in her abdomen. And then in the overweight model, it's even more obvious. So this drives home the point that belly fat is not a simple matter of gaining or losing fat, because it all depends on what you're storing it. Calories matter, but hormones may matter more when it comes to where we store fat and how to attack stubborn areas of body fat unique to us. So if you're a woman doing everything right and still struggling with female belly fat, especially a thin woman suffering from belly fat, you need to understand that the primary issue for you is stress management. It's not too many calories. It probably is not too many carbohydrates. It's not because you're not doing enough exercise. It has to do with stress. So stress is not just unpleasant high pressure at the office anxiety. It's all of that, but it's also a new mother, home with a little baby, sleep deprived, nutritionally depleted. She is probably more stressed out than anybody out there, despite the fact that she's probably thrilled and happy. So how do we start to combat the stress? Well, since belly fat can be mostly attributed to stress, consider any and all rest and recovery activities that lower stress. So 1 extra hour of sleep, so making sleep a priority, getting a massage, taking a nice Epsom salt bath, taking a nap, and of course having intimacy all helps to decrease stress. So estrogen and progesterone together block the negative influence of insulin and cortisol on belly fat. They are the reasons many women tend to have lower incidence of belly fat. But for those women who do have belly fat, this is normally created by hormonal situations that lower estrogen and progesterone. So what are some of the hormonal shifts that occur with stress? Well, the most common reason for these hormonal changes are chronic stress and menopause. Now, both stress and menopause result in a hormonal impact that is lower in estrogen, higher in testosterone, and higher in cortisol and insulin. So let's talk about a condition called PCOS, polycystic ovarian syndrome. Now, compared to lean women, even lean PCOS women have significantly more fat storage in their belly. So to combat this, we have two main goals. First is relax the body and decrease the stress hormones, especially cortisol. What is one of the things that causes increased levels of cortisol? Lack of sleep. Make the body as insulin sensitive as possible by using smart nutrition and exercise. So we want to facilitate insulin sensitivity, but where do we want it to occur? We don't want it to occur in the fat cells. We want it to occur in the muscle cells. So how do we make our muscle cells more insulin sensitive? Exercise. Okay. When the mitochondria are being pushed to produce more energy within the cell, it's going to tell the cell membrane to become more permeable to allow sugar to enter into the body. The receptor site for insulin on the cell will light up like a Christmas tree and allow those insulin to hit the receptor and open the doors wide to allow sugar to come in. But it's exercise driven, not just diet driven. Exercise, diet, and supplements combined can help to target belly fat. We suggest diet and exercise. The 3-2-1 approach is best for blasting belly fat. So if you're a woman dealing with belly fat, follow this protocol. So what's the 3-2-1 again? It's 3 meals a day, 2 shakes, 1 whole food meal, and having starch with that evening meal to help with sleep, because sleep is very important in decreasing stress. Suggested supplements. Well, metabolic multivitamin that includes high doses of B vitamins and chromium. This also helps to combat insulin resistance and provide resources. Stress depletes, especially zinc, magnesium, and vitamin B6. You can also use green coffee extract, taking 1,000 milligrams per day. Like green tea extract, this is an insulin sensitizing supplement. Now, for those who were on the call a couple of weeks ago, you know that I spoke very highly of ID Life Nutrition, taking a HIPAA-compliant assessment to help you to determine what type of vitamins you should be taking. If anyone has questions on that, I certainly would like to talk with you more about that, help you through your assessment so that you too can have the right supplements to help you combat your chronic stress, maybe some pitfalls in your diet, and also to help you continue with maintaining adequate amount of exercise. So berberine is something else that has also been shown to work very, very well. 1,000 to 2,000 milligrams per day in divided doses. Now, berberine may have some action against alpha-adrenergic receptors and outperformed metformin for insulin issues associated with PCOS in one small randomized trial. Now, metformin is a medication is typically given to type 2 diabetics. We have seen great success with this compound clinically, and inositol is another great insulin sensitizing supplement. That's something I add to my shakes. It comes in a powder form. It's available on our Keenan Medical Fitness store in our Amazon store. Curcumin, okay, curcumin or turmeric is another thing we suggest. And taking 1,000 to 4,000 milligrams per day. This helps the metabolic command and control center, the hypothalamus and the pituitary, better to react to stress. It also blocks 2 major enzymes involved in fat storage. That's the fatty acid synthesis and belly fat resistance. And it's a big, long, fancy enzyme. Don't worry about that. And may have some positive impact on ovarian function in PCOS. So what is a metabolic multivitamin? This is a term we use to distinguish a higher-end multivitamin designed to help the body deal with hormonal issues from the standard multivitamins found at most health food stores. So a good metabolic multivitamin will contain adequate amounts of supplements shown to help insulin signaling. These include alpha-lipoic acid, chromium, green tea extract, among others. These multiples will also have high-potency B complex, zinc, and magnesium. So again, if you have questions, we would take you to the ID Life site. If you don't have it, you can go to my site. It's Mike, M-I-K-E, Keenan, K-E-E-N-A-N 520.idlife.com, and it's IDLIFE.com, just like it sounds. Okay. Now, whereas female belly fat does best with the more restorative 3-2-1 protocol, male belly fat responds more favorably to a 3-2-2 approach. So that's where we have the 3 whole food meals and the 2 protein shakes and 2 snacks. But what also does that mean? That means a much higher level of exercise. Okay. So, and again, those would be your 3 more heavy-duty strength training programs, 2 of your metabolic training, and 2 days of walking. So do you want to know what the formula for a six-pack is? It's protein plus vegetables times sleep plus intense exercise equals a six-pack. So P is protein, V is vegetables, adds a high-powered hunger-suppressing punch with little insulin production. This means less calories and better hormonal balance. SL is sleep and magnifies this effect by lowering cortisol and helping to increase human growth hormone secretion, a fat-burning and muscle-building hormone. Throw in intense exercise, breathlessness and burning, that favors weight training and interval training, will also increase human growth hormone and testosterone for more belly fat burning over long-duration cardio, which tends to increase cortisol levels. And now you have the recipe for the male six-pack. The fix lies in replacing the sugar and starch with fiber and raising the protein while normalizing the fat. The foods with the highest ratio of fiber relative to starch are the non-starchy vegetables. That's things like broccoli and cauliflower and string beans and asparagus and Brussels sprouts. You also want to shoot for 9 servings per day. One of the biggest mistakes many make when looking for the tight six-pack is confusing starches like beans, corn, and potatoes as vegetables. These foods are wet starches, which certainly can work in small amounts, but they need to take a backseat to the non-starchy vegetable intake. So here's a 3-2-2 approach for you. Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, do 20 minutes of the metabolic chain workouts. Don't take structured rests. Instead, push until you can't, rest until you can, and see how many rounds you can do in 20 minutes. On Tuesdays and Thursdays, do 20 minutes of rest-based training intervals. Do 20 seconds hard and then rest for 40 seconds. Then 30 seconds hard and 30 seconds of rest. Then 40 seconds hard and 20 seconds of rest. Then 1 minute hard, 1 minute rest. Repeat 4 times. Or if you can handle it, go do track sprints. Okay? And again, all this is on the RX Studio. So then on Saturdays, you do some traditional cardio, a hike, a bike. Not a big advocate of running, but if you need to run, you certainly can. And then Sunday, rest. Don't forget, walk daily to get more and get more than 8 hours a night sleep. Okay, love handles. Men, to a lesser extent women, can often find that fat stored on the lateral sides of the midsection and the lower back, also called love handles, are especially resistant to fat loss. When I trained a cosmetic surgeon, this is one of the areas he said that he tends to work on the most. Because even when people get thin, they still have a tough time losing the weight in that area. This phenomenon may be a result of the unique physiology of the fat stored in this area. This subcutaneous abdominal fat has special properties, including decreased adipose tissue blood flow, increased insulin sensitivity, more fat storage and less release, and decreased catecholamine sensitivity, which means decreased fat burning. Now, like with all stubborn fat areas, we remind you that insulin causes increased fat storage and decreased fat release from fat cells due to its stimulation of the major fat storing enzyme LPL, and which stands for lipoprotein lipase, and its inhibition of the major fat releasing enzyme hormone sensitive lipase, or we say HSL. It's that subcutaneous fat that is more insulin reactive and therefore stores fat more easily than fat is harder to burn off. Oops, so something pop up on my screen. Let me get rid of that. All right. Come on. How come this always comes up in the middle of my presentations? Isn't it amazing? And of course, I can't move forward because I can't advance my slides now until this goes away. Give me a second, guys. I apologize. All right. Give me a couple seconds here. This is a good time for me to dive out. Okay, I'm back. Never mind. I was going to say, let me go check to see if there's any questions. All right. So, to combat the love handles, we have 3 goals. First, we want to decrease insulin, block the alpha receptors, and ramp up beta receptor stimulation. So what do? 3-2-2 diet. Okay, we talked about a low starch diet is less than 125 grams per day of carbohydrates from all sources. This may confuse you a bit since we have rarely given specific amounts for you to shoot at within this program we're doing. Don't worry, we still want you to use the structured flexibility concept. The amount of carbs is too low, and you'll know if your head goes out of check, then just adjust. You can think of a cup of rice or a potato as about 30 grams of carbs. So stick with the 3-2-2 program. You'll be hitting this amount almost perfectly without even trying. However, given love handles sometimes the most stubborn areas in the body, you may want to eventually get very specific about carb intake and perhaps revisit the carb tipping point of adjusting timing of carbs as well. Okay, male chest fat. These are also referred to as man boobs, and it may be the most distressing fat men deal with. The good news is it's not nearly as stubborn as the love handles area, and is usually dealt with very nicely by following the 3-2-1 or 3-2-2 protocols outlined. When it's not the case, you want to think about 2 hormones, testosterone and estrogen. This protocol attempts to raise the testosterone while lowering estrogen. There are several things we can tell you we have found work very clinically in this area. Vitamins like zinc, magnesium, and vitamin D can definitely make a difference if a man is deficient. And we find upwards of 70% of our men in our clinical practice are indeed deficient in one or more of these nutrients. While supplementing with these nutrients will do nothing to raise testosterone if you're not deficient in them, but if you are deficient, you will have a genuine impact. That is why what we've seen clinically, and research also validates us on this point. Now, there's an enzyme you have called aromatase. And what aromatase does is it converts excess testosterone into estrogen. Now, many men with lower testosterone have high levels of activity in this enzyme. There are reliable natural aromatase inhibitors used in our clinic every day. Some of the better ones include Chrysian, Nettles, Phygium, and Saw Palmetto. Many of these same compounds block another testosterone impacting enzyme called 5-alpha reductase. Okay, again, a good male support vitamin that's available through ID Life as part of your nutritional program would help with these things. So, diet and exercise, following the 3-2-1 and 3-2-2 cycling protocol, and exercise doing the same thing. So there's going to be weeks where you want to focus on your 3-2-1. There's going to be other weeks where you need to focus on the 3-2-2, depending on what it is that we've laid out for you here that you want to accomplish. Okay, vitamin D. Let's talk about some of the supplements. And again, this presentation is here. You can go back to this many, many times. There's a lot of numbers here that I usually go through with people, but I have to tell you that the HIPAA compliant assessment that ID Life offers is going to get a lot of this guesswork out of the way for you, because this is where these numbers come from. So all you have to do is take the assessment, and then when the supplements come to you, just take them, and then you know that you're getting covered with all these kind of things. And it just makes life so much easier than to try to go to the health food store to try to figure all this out. Okay, now targeting according to a woman's cycle. Okay, now this is really part of Susan's domain. She has some very good information in her presentation. So this is where I jump off. If you want more info on polycystic ovarian syndrome, Susan has an entire protocol on this as well. And you can go ahead and you can look at that. She has it on YouTube. And this is also part of Susan's Stubborn Female Fat Loss Seminar. Okay, let me get out, then go back to here. Sorry, gang. Okay, so I'm looking in my chat box to see if there's any questions, and I don't have any. So listen, I'm going to wish everybody a Happy New Year. We will be starting this program up again in January, okay? So I want to invite people to come back out again. I know Susan has put an offer out to many of you to join us in the spring at no additional cost. So I want you to take advantage of that. But that's all I have. You have the recording of this. If you have any questions and concerns, Susan and I are still here to help you. So feel free to reach out to us. Have a great night and Happy New Year, and I'll talk to you all real soon. Bye-bye.